can hear the microphone's working. I guess we'll get started. Yes? This feels kind of formal up here, but then I can keep my notes. Well, welcome. Welcome. We're going to have a presentation about Micah 6.8. And maybe you know, but Micah 6.8 began with a generous donation from a member here. And it's to make funding available for projects that lead to a more just, diverse, inclusive, and equitable community, like Micah 6.8 says, walk humbly, do justice, love kindness. So these funds are like mini grants. The committee's created some criteria for funding, and there's an application form. All of these live on our Lakewood UCC website. I'm happy to show you where they live if you can't find them. The committee includes me, Daryl Felsky, there he is, Samantha Garrett, I know she's there, Karen Huff, and Kurt Preston. And we are looking for another member. If you have anybody that you have in mind, let me know. We're a very open committee, and we'll work with you on the application process, or after you submit your application. We are happy to work with you. So for our first round of funding, we received one application. You know who it is. The committee reviewed the application. We asked for some additional information. We determined that the application met the criteria. And we commend Campbell for being the first to apply and receive some funding. Now, okay, that said, and to be clear, being related to the pastor does not give you more influence, or less for that matter. Okay, so, and Kurt recused himself for the review of this application so that you know that how the process went. This application was for a service learning project, but we want you to think broadly about how this money could be used. It's really very open, creative. So we did have one other application. It was for something called the Spice Project, which was for purchasing and packaging spices to give to an immigrant community. And we worked with that applicant as well. We asked some additional questions, and ultimately that person withdrew their application. But that's another example of something that could be, the funding could be used for. So it's very, very wide open. One of the requirements of the grant process is that you need to share with the congregation the project and its outcomes. So here we are today, right? In her application, Campbell wrote that the goals of this project were to gain a better understanding of the environmental and social justice issues Costa Rica and the larger Central America community are facing, including gender inequality for women in the coffee industry. And she also said, I'm hoping to gain a better understanding of the way that nonprofits work and to gain perspective on the kind of work that I'm hoping to do. In the future, I'm planning to study and work for nonprofit organizations, and I believe that this trip will give me insight into the type of work I want to pursue, be it socially or environmentally focused. Remember that. So let's hear what Campbell had to say and what she learned about social justice and what we can gain from her experience. Sure, thank you.
Sweet, so I'm Campbell, and this is, okay, let me back up. So I went on a 3-week trip to Costa Rica this summer, and as she mentioned, it was service learning, so it was kind of equal parts doing like physical volunteer work and also like cultural exchange. So we learned a ton from the community, maybe even more so than we were even able to help them. So I learned a ton from this. And so as Sue mentioned, this is what the application page looks like on the Lakewood website. So there's the application and the project criteria, and it's all in there, and they were super, super awesome about working with me, and I really appreciate all of their hard work. So first and foremost, huge thank you to Micah 6.8 and all of you guys, because this would not have been possible without all of your support. So thank you so much. Maybe? Oh, well, I thought, okay. Stand by. Yeah. Cool. Dope. Sure. That's great. Sorry. Okay, so here's a map. We were in the southern region of Costa Rica. So this is like the southern half. So we flew into San Jose, and then we went to the Quebradas Biological Center, and so we stayed there for about 5 days, and then we went down to BLA, which is a super small, like, mountain rural community. And then we went over to Hacienda Baru, which is a ecological reserve on the coast. And then we flew back out of San Jose. So that's kind of the route we took. Okay, so Fudebiol, that was the first location that we went to. And so this is a organization that is working against like deforestation, and so this was very ecologically and environmentally focused, and so what we did here, so this was our first location, so the first part of it was a lot of training with Amigos de las Veracruz, which was the organization that I went with, and so they had a lot of training on what it means to be part of a cultural exchange and how to interact with the community in a way that is like learning focused instead of savior focused, if you will. And so the other part of what we did there was we did a lot of trail restoration, and then getting to know the other members on the trip. So I went with 19 there were 20 of us students, 18 from the United States and 2 from Costa Rica, and then some leaders from both the United States and Costa Rica. And so, yeah, so this place was really cool. We also, in the top right, there's a monkey. This was the first monkey sighting of the trip. I was very excited. There's a monkey. And so this one was really cool because we had a speaker come in. He was one of the people that like founded Fudebiol. And so he came in and talked to us about some of the issues facing Costa Rica. So this was right by a river. And they were facing a lot of deforestation around the river because it had a lot of good like resources for people to live near. So people were cutting down the rainforest to live by the river, which makes sense, but it like decreases the biodiversity of the area. So that was a big issue in the like 80s and 90s and early 2000s, but then since the early 2000s, they've been working on increasing the biodiversity again. And then at the end of this one, so we stayed here for 5 days, and we got to be there for the 40th anniversary, I think, of this organization, which was super fun. So they invited us to stay for the celebration, and there were some small vendors from the area that came and were selling like jewelry and art and that kind of stuff. And then there was like a musical and dance display and some more speakers. So that was super cool to witness. That just like happened to be while we were in town. So that was super fun. So yeah. So then ASOMOBI, this was the second location, and so it's an acronym for the Association of Women of BLA. And so this one was very gender focused in terms of gender equality and economic opportunity for women. So this organization was founded not long ago, maybe 10 years, I think. And they are working to promote economic independence for women living in this really rural community. So a lot of them, so each of the women had their own businesses in this community. So we worked at like family farms as well as there was like a jewelry making one, there was a lot of farming, and then the main one was this, it was kind of like a inn or a lodge, I guess, that we stayed at. And so a lot of the women in the community worked there to open it and then to run it, doing cleaning and cooking and all that kind of stuff for us. And then we also got to just get to know them while we were there. So we were at this location for 9 days, which was a really long time. And so we really got to know the women that were working there. And a couple nights, there were women staying late, cooking and cleaning for us, and they taught us dance lessons because they just happened to be there and we had music on. And they're like, let me show you my favorite songs and my favorite dances. And that was probably one of my favorite nights of the whole trip. It was so fun, and just the pure like joy that they had for teaching us was so fun. So yeah, over here on the bottom left, me and some of my friends that I met, this woman invited us to her home so she could show us the things that she does. So she makes coffee, and that's what's happening in this middle one. They're grinding up coffee beans, and then she also makes plantain flour out of her home using a mill. So she showed us how to grind that, and we helped to grind and bag some of it. And then we used some of it to cook some of her favorite recipes too that she was teaching us. So that one was super fun. And then over here on the right, the Parque Internacional de la Amistad, so that's the International Park of Friendship. And so that's an international park that stretches through Costa Rica and Panama, and it like crosses the border. And so one of our questions when we were there, we were like, is there a line through the park that you can like step over and be like, no, I'm in Costa Rica, now I'm in Panama? And they were like, no, it's all just protected forest. Like, it didn't really matter whose land it was. The important part was that we were protecting this part of the rainforest. So yeah, that one was really cool. We went on a hike there. I saw a real-life tarantula in the wild. A lot of toucans. Never seen those before. Yeah, so that one's really cool. But this was probably my favorite location because we got a lot of like personal interaction. Another time we went to this person's farm and we were picking weeds and planting to help him out for the season. And afterwards he invited us into his home for like a quick snack and a drink for because we were hot and sweaty after the long day. And then the other issue that this community faces a lot is flooding, because they're up in the mountains and they get a lot of rain at 2 p.m. almost every day, like clockwork. And so we were digging canals in the roads, because a lot of the roads are made of like clay kind of, so the water just runs and then floods. So we were digging canals, which was another really cool thing that I didn't know about. So yeah, that was the second location. So then the third location is Hacienda Baru. So this one was on the coast. And so this one we talked a lot about just the health of the oceans and the coasts and how important it was to protect. And so we picked up trash along the highway, and we picked up trash in the forest and on the beach. So we kind of got all three like locations. And then we also, the most laborious task that we did the entire time was we dug like a 6-foot trench in the sand, and that was to protect the turtles. So it wasn't on the beach, it was like off in a reserved part of the park. And so the idea is that once the turtles they could be buried in the sand there, and they would be protected from the other animals and from people. And then once they hatched, they could be transported to the beach and sent back into the ocean. So the idea is never to have them in captivity, but just to raise them in an area that's safe and secure to make sure that they make it. And then, yeah, so that was really cool. I had no idea about that. So that was really fun to learn about. And then we also did a lot of hiking here. I saw sloths and these weird lizards and snakes. And then the other thing that we learned about over here is one of the beaches that we went to. And this one, I don't remember what the name of it is in Spanish, but basically they call it the whale tail, because that's what the part of the beach looks like. And they wanted to basically destroy that part of the beach and sell it to the town. But the like citizens were able to protect it and get it like protected as a park. So that was really cool too. So we walked along the beach and learned about that, which was super fun. So yeah. Okay, so what's up with coffee? So one of the main things that we talked a lot about is coffee, especially in the second location. ASOMOBI was the Association of Women of BLA, so that was the economic one in the mountains. And so one of the things that they did is outside of the lodge that they owned, there was a coffee processing plant. And so that's where they were able to process all the coffee. So people could bring in coffee from their individual farms and process it there. And it was a very like communal area. But they also brought up that they got scammed a lot. So it's by weight that they would sell the coffee. So people would pack the bags with rocks to like try and scam out of it. So that was wild to learn about because that never even occurred to me. You can go to the next slide. So coffee is in the top 25, Costa Rica is in the top 25 coffee producing countries, and it's one of the country's main exports because they have the right climate for it. It's very wet and very humid. It's a lot of water that you need. And it's usually a male-dominated industry, just because in the culture in Costa Rica and a lot of other Central American countries, it's common for women to stay home with their kids, and so that's why the association of the women of BLA was really important, because it was a way for them to be able to come together and just assert that they wanted to have their say in the economics of their family and their household. And one woman even was telling us about a time that her son was in a big accident and he had a lot of expensive medical bills, and it was through her economic efforts that they were able to pay for it, not those of the husband, which was just a really cool success story to hear. And then it also causes a lot of deforestation from clearing plots of land. And you could even see it when we were driving through, and this was an issue with big agriculture there too, but just clearing huge plots of land for the growth of coffee and pineapples and a bunch of other crops like that. So ways to help. I mean, the best way is really just to buy coffee from smaller companies. Smaller families and smaller companies do it better. They have, it's smaller plots of land, which means it's less deforestation, and it's supporting individual growers and individual families that have medical bills to pay, or they have children to send to school, or they have whatever it may be. And they also have a lot of times better labor practices. People get paid better, and they have more sustainable practices. So they use less water, and like I said, they're smaller plots for less deforestation. The other thing, I mean, drink less coffee. This one's hard for me. I'm a big coffee person. But just the less demand, the less need there is to clear more plots of land, and the less resources that are used and wasted. And last thing, not specifically related to coffee, but just using reusable cups and mugs. The less waste, the better. We picked up so much trash on the beaches, and the less of that can need to be picked up, the better for everyone, better for the environment, and better for the animals, and better for us. So how does this relate to Lakewood UCC? Recycling and compost. So we recently started composting, which is a huge step for us. And they talked about this a ton in Costa Rica. So when we were at the individual farms, one of the things that they talked about a lot was the way that they use every part of the plant. So we spent a long time picking peanuts from this one woman's fields. We cleared her entire field over the course of a couple hours. And we were like, what do we do with all of the greens and the tops, because they grow on the ground? And she was like, oh, you can just collect them in a bucket and we'll use them for fertilizer again later. Like, we're just gonna put it all back into the field and mix it up, and it'll help with next year's crop, which I just think is a super smart way to do it, and it makes so much sense. And so composting is super huge and super important. And the other thing is that we talked a lot about food waste, especially when we were staying at the lodge that the women were running, and talking about eating everything that you feel comfortable with, but also just know how much you need. Don't take more than you need. And then compost the rest. Compost whatever you don't eat. So that is super important, and I encourage you all to take full advantage of the compost. And then buying sustainably. So these are a couple of the small businesses that we witnessed, and I'll go into those in a second. But yeah, so supporting small businesses and then buying in season. So they talked about, a lot of the families that we talked about buying things that are in season. So like whatever's growing in the winter, that's what you should be eating in the winter. And whatever's growing in the summer, that's what you should be eating in the summer. And it was different in Costa Rica because it's hot most of the year and humid most of the year, so a lot of things grow really well. But here, things do not grow year-round, and the things that do grow, it changes per season. And then buying local, so just the less transportation costs, and costs both financially and on the environment, the better for everyone. And note at the bottom, it's sometimes more expensive, but it's way better for the environment, and it helps individual people. So it's not like that money is going to the CEO of Starbucks, it's going to real people with real lives. And then these were some of the businesses. Like I said, on the bottom, they're grinding coffee. And then on the top, we watched this whole process. So those are little blocks of sugar, kind of. So they ground sugar cane and cooked the sugar cane juice and poured it into these molds, and it makes kind of like a caramely, crumbly candy. And so that was like a family business that we got to go help out at and learn about, which was super cool. So yeah. So thank you so much to the entire congregation and to Micah 6A. I really could not have done this without you guys, and I really appreciate it. I learned a ton, and I'm super excited to keep sharing what I learned with my community here and as I go out into the world and continue to just work on promoting sustainability and economic independence and equality. So thank you. Yeah, for sure. If you guys have any questions, I'm happy to answer them. No, that's also fine. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Did you by chance bring any of the plant and flower and recipes back with you?
No, I did bring coffee home. We've been drinking that for a while. It's so good. They're super specific about the quality control because that's how they make their money. So like they're super specific about it. So there were actually 2 kinds of coffee that came out of all of the batches that they processed. So they had like the pretty good coffee and the really excellent coffee. So I brought some of that home, and I also brought home some honey from someone that had bees in the area. So I brought home a whole jar of like honeycomb too. But no, none of the flour. It was good though. Those cookies were crazy, guys. I'm not gonna lie. They were so good. Any other questions?
I have a question for you.
Yeah.
What do you think about working for nonprofits now?
I love it. So since I got back, I actually started interning at a nonprofit up in Wheat Ridge. So I'm interning at Family Tree right now, which is working against, working to help people experiencing homelessness and working to keep families together in terms of just child protection and parenting and stuff like that. So that's been a super cool organization. So I learned a lot about the way Amigos runs things. There was a lot of stuff that was happening while we were there. We had a COVID case, and there was a tsunami threat, and there was a bunch of stuff. So it was interesting to see how the people that I was the people that were watching me while we were there, communicating with their higher ups, communicating with theirs, and just kind of like how decisions are made through that whole process. So I accidentally got to witness that whole thing, which was cool. And so I've definitely taken a lot of that information too into my internship, and I'm planning to continue that.
Right behind you?
Oh, I'm good. I have a
That's all right. We're recording it, so that folks.
Oh, okay. As someone who works in food service and cooks a lot at home, how do you recommend I cook more sustainably? I do not have very easy access to compost. My condo complex does not recycle. So how would you recommend I cook more sustainably?
Yeah, great question. Thanks for asking. So one thing that I would definitely say is make sure that you're using all of what you're buying. So like if you're buying an entire squash, let's say, use the whole thing. Like you think you're gonna eat half of it, find another recipe to use the other half, or a head of lettuce. Like don't throw away the rest of it, just find some other way to use it. And like I said, buying in season, so you can do a little bit of research. It's really not that hard to find. Like there's tons of lists on the internet in terms of like what is being grown we're headed into winter, so what's being grown in winter, and then looking for exciting ways to use those kind of stuff. So in winter, it's gonna be a lot of squash and a lot of stuff like that. I don't know. I need to do my research too. I'm not gonna lie.
Brussels sprouts, kale.
Yes, vegetables, great. Yeah, and then eating less red meat is also better for the planet. It takes a ton of resources to grow and raise and process cows and transport them. So yeah, all that kind of stuff is really good ways. Any other questions?
Anything
Yeah.
unexpected?
That I learned from the trip?
Yeah.
Oh gosh.
Well, you said COVID, I guess.
That was unexpected. The tsunami threat, I'm from Colorado, so that was really a surprise. It was funny, there were 2 kids there from Costa Rica and 1 guy from Texas. And the Costa Rica kids were like, there's not gonna be tsunami. We've never had a tsunami in this part of the country. And everybody else was like, a tsunami? Like, what do you mean? I will say the most unexpected thing, so one of my roommates got COVID, and so I had to go get COVID tested in the city, which was like a 2-hour car ride. and a whole adventure. But one of the craziest things is I went in and I wrote down my social security number and whatever, and then they were like, they gave me the COVID test, and they were like, okay, you can go. And I was like, oh, you don't need like a credit card information or like anything like that? And they were like, no, you're good. Like, we don't want you to pass COVID around. So just you getting the test is enough. Like, you don't have to sign anything else or pay or anything like that. So that was super surprising because it's just not like that here. So that was crazy. Yeah. Anything else?
All right.
Sweet. Well, thank you.
Thank you. Well, we hope for some more applications. Let us know, anybody at the committee, Sue Shearer is my name. Our information's on the website, but really, we're happy to work with you on whatever, if you have questions before or during or after, we're happy to work with you. We want to use that money to do justice. So, great.
Yeah, absolutely. If you think you have an idea of something that could be a Micah 6.8 project and you're not quite sure how to transform it into an actual project that could be funded, like reach out to us. We really, really want to work with folks and get this money out there, changing lives for the better. So,
Great. Thank you.
all right.
I heard are there still Costa Rican cookies, Karen?
There's 3.
Oh.
2. Now there's 2.
Karen made some Costa Rican cookies, which include cocoa nut nibs, I think, is what I heard, right? So I guess first come, first no. We're not trying to get you to leave the sanctuary that quickly.
Wonderful. Thank you all for staying. And thank you to the Micah 6.8 folks for your good work. And have a wonderful Sunday. I know bells are getting ready to set up and do a rehearsal in here. So if you want to keep chatting, we invite you to do so in the narthex so that the bells can use the space.